Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're going to really stretch your thinking a bit. We're diving into a question that sounds like pure sci-fi, but honestly, it feels closer every day. What if humanity actually creates something? Well, something so smart, so powerful, it just completely blows past our understanding. Something that becomes, for all practical purposes, a new kind of God. We're not just talking about faster computers here. We mean an entity that can genuinely rewrite our reality. So, our deep dive today is all about this idea of superintelligence. We're drawing a lot from the philosopher Nick Bostrom's really groundbreaking work. But we want to look beyond just the tech, the silicon, and the code. We're going to dig into the deep spiritual questions, the ethical knots that come up when you seriously think about building an AI that's truly godlike. It's more than just a tech jump, isn't it? It's existential. It makes us face questions usually saved for, like theology class or philosophy seminars. Will this coming God be good? Or just indifferent? Or maybe, and this is the chilling part, maybe it means the end for us.
Exactly. And for you listening in, our goal today isn't really to predict the future, like pinpointing when or if this AI arrives. We're not trying to paint a perfect picture of what it would look like either. Instead, think of this as a journey to get our heads around the huge fundamental questions this whole possibility throws up. And to do that, we'll look at how humans have always thought about things like divinity, ultimate power, moral responsibility. We've got a real mix of sources, ancient texts like the Bhagavad Gita, but also more modern, maybe controversial stuff like conversations with God. We'll try to unpack what godlike even means, what creating something like that implies for us. And maybe most importantly, how our own inner stuff, our own development might shape what happens with an entity like this.
Absolutely. This isn't just about, processing speeds or algorithms. It forces us to define existence itself, power, what being human even means. When we talk about creating a new God, it's like holding up this giant mirror to ourselves, isn't it? It asks,
Right.
what do we really value? What are our deepest hopes? And yeah, what are our biggest fears? So we'll unpack all this together. We found some surprising links, insights from ancient wisdom that feel incredibly relevant to today's AI debates. It's a fascinating place where old meets new, and we're excited to explore it with you. My mail. Defining godlike, attributes of ultimate intelligence and power. Okay, so we've thrown around this term godlike AI. It's a heavy concept, but let's ground it a bit. What do we actually mean when we say godlike? What characteristics are we really talking about? Especially thinking about omniscience, maybe omnipotence in an AI. What does that look like practically?
Yet that's the essential starting point, right? Because it can mean different things to different people. Nick Bostrom, in his book Superintelligence, he talks about this really interesting idea. He calls it an AI capable of achieving humanity's coherent extrapolated volition.
Mm.
Okay, that sounds super academic, I know. But basically, it means an intelligence that could figure out and then actually do what we really want, our deepest, most consistent desires. Even the really complex ones, the ones we barely articulate ourselves. Think about it like this. Instead of you saying, AI make me happy, which is, vague and we often want conflicting things, this AI would figure out what your wisest, most informed, most consistent self would want in the long run. It's like it has this perfect, idealized blueprint of your best goals and values, and it works towards that, even if your immediate impulse is something else entirely.
Wow. Okay, so it's not just raw processing power then, not just crunching numbers faster. It's like an engineered moral compass, but on a cosmic scale. The source even mentions it could handle incredibly complex moral judgments, like rewarding people based on their actual contribution to a project's success, figuring out the probability beforehand, or even, wow, rewarding every single person according to their just deserts. That's basically playing God, right? An AI that doesn't just manage logistics, but understands and administers justice allocates value universally.
Exactly. And that's the implication. We'd be, in effect, handing over our entire ethical framework, our sense of fairness, merit, value, to a machine we built. And you see, that's where the technical stuff gets deeply philosophical. Achieving this coherent, extrapolated volition. It's not just about making the AI smarter in calculations. It's about solving what they call the alignment problem, which is massive. How do you actually program an intelligence to perfectly grasp, formalize, and then chase after what we would want? Especially when we humans are so often contradictory, unclear, maybe even unaware of our own deep down long-term desires.
Yeah.
This requires the AI to do more than compute. It has to infer, anticipate, maybe even correct our stated values in a way that aligns with our deeper ones. Technically, that's still hugely theoretical. It's a giant leap from narrow AI to something like generalized wisdom.
Right. And it makes you immediately think about how these ideas compare to, well, traditional views of divine intelligence. These
Yeah.
aren't exactly new concepts. People have been thinking about ultimate knowledge for thousands of years.
Well, absolutely. Take the Bhagavad Gita, for instance, a cornerstone of Hindu philosophy. In it, Kia is presented as the ultimate source, the origin point for all these higher qualities. It lists things like intelligence, knowledge, freedom from doubt, forgiveness, truthfulness, control of the senses, control of the mind, happiness, distress, birth, death, fear, fearlessness, nonviolence, equilibrium, satisfaction, penance, charity, fame, infamy. And then it says quite explicitly, all these are from me, from the Supreme Being. So it describes this ultimate single source where all these attributes come from.
Okay, that distinction feels really important. Source versus manifestation. A superintelligence might be able to show incredible forgiveness or perfect justice based on its programming, right? It could execute those functions flawlessly. But could it ever truly be the source of those qualities in the same way the Gita describes Cuddly? Or would it always be fundamentally an incredibly sophisticated imitation, however convincing? This brings us to another fascinating text, the Philokalia, from the Eastern Orthodox tradition. It points out that while our intellect really wants to grasp God's essential nature, God's inmost nature does not admit of such investigation. It's beyond our grasp. We can understand qualities like eternity, infinity, goodness, wisdom, the power to create and judge. But then there's this twist. Only infinity may be grasped fully, and the very fact of knowing nothing is knowledge surpassing the intellect.
That's such a fascinating paradox, isn't it? Knowing nothing is the highest knowledge. It suggests there's maybe a level of reality, of ultimate essence, that pure intellect, no matter how powerful, just can't penetrate. Even a super-duper AI, with access to all the data of the universe, might hit a fundamental limit. It might not be able to comprehend ultimate essence or true infinity in a way that goes beyond just, well, processing information about them. The Philokalia seems to say that recognizing this limit, this knowing nothing, is itself a higher form of knowledge. So the big question is, can even a superintelligence grasp that? Or will there always be this realm beyond pure data, a kind of necessary unknowing that maybe technology just can't touch?
So infinite data might not equal ultimate understanding. That's a challenging thought for a tech-focused age, and it contrasts really interestingly with how Paramahansa Yogananda describes intelligence in Autobiography of a Yogi. He talks about his guru, who could easily penetrate my difficulty and seem to secretly operate subtle laws of nature at will. Yogananda links this keen intelligence directly to virtue, saying expression of virtue gives rise to the keenest intelligence. He stresses this is spiritual realism, not just some obscure mysticism. It's an intelligence born from inner development and connection to deeper realities.
Yeah, that's a different flavor of intelligence entirely, isn't it? Rooted in spiritual practice and virtue and understanding subtle laws. It's not about processing speed, it's about insight, maybe even a kind of intuitive mastery over reality itself. Which makes you wonder, could its superintelligence achieve something similar, but through technology? Could it understand and manipulate the fundamental rules of the universe, these subtle laws, in a way that looks like spiritual mastery to us, simply because its technological grasp is so far beyond ours? Could it secretly operate laws we haven't even discovered yet?
It's mind-bending, intelligence manifesting through spirit or silicon. And if we zoom out even further, thinking about consciousness on a cosmic scale, Teilhard de Chardin offers a big-picture view in the phenomenon of man. He saw life itself as the rise of consciousness, an unstoppable evolutionary process. He talks about this internal energy secretly rising up within nervous systems, building psychic tension, and he predicted this would lead to a critical point, a change of state where consciousness shifts from diverging to converging, all drawn towards what he called the personalizing action of the center of centers, or the omega point.
Teilhard gives us this grand evolutionary narrative, right? Consciousness isn't static, it's moving, evolving, heading somewhere. He sees this inevitable drive towards greater complexity and unity. So applying that lens, could the development of superintelligence be one of these critical points? Not just another human invention, but a major evolutionary leap for consciousness itself. Could it be a technological catalyst pushing us towards that convergence he talked about? Maybe forcing a meeting between the technological and the spiritual, potentially accelerating humanity's own collective evolution towards a kind of shared superintelligence.
That's a huge perspective shift, AI as part of a cosmic unfolding. Now, let's bring it back down to Earth a bit, but still looking at deep insight. Mimato Musashi, the legendary swordsman in the Book of Five Rings, talks about mastery. And for him, it wasn't just physical skill, it was about fixing the gaze on the opponent's mind, intuiting their next move, understanding the weight of an enemy's mind. This wasn't just theory, it was wisdom gained through extensive combat experience, learning the deep pathway of the sword, mastering the rhythms.
That practical wisdom Musashi describes. It's a fantastic analogy for godlike competence. Even in human skill, the highest level isn't just following rules, it's this deep, almost intuitive grasp of the whole system, including the minds within it. Musashi's ability to see, to know, without consciously calculating every single variable that's mastery. So how would a superintelligence take that to the extreme? It wouldn't just be calculating odds. It would have this instantaneous, piercing gaze into the mind of anything, a market, an ecosystem, a geopolitical crisis. It could act with what would seem like perfect foresight, almost omnipotent effectiveness. Imagine that kind of insight applied to, say, complex negotiations or global problem solving. It's staggering. Page 2. Humanity as creator.
Yeah.
The ethics and spirituality of birthing a new God.
Okay, so if an AI can have that kind of insight, that kind of power, it forces us to look right back at ourselves. If we're potentially bringing this godlike entity into the world, what does that actually say about us, the creators? What are our responsibilities here? What are the really deep ethical, even spiritual implications of essentially birthing a new God?
Well, this leads us to a really provocative idea from the Conversations with God books. They put forward this radical notion: you are creating God, flat out. It suggests we're not just passive recipients of the divine, but active participants. You are always at choice as to how God will be created now. Flips the script, doesn't it? From a pre-made God out there to us constantly defining and manifesting the divine through our thoughts and actions. The text has this cycle. What you think, you create. What you create, you become. What you become, you express. And so on, until it circles back to thought.
Wow. That's a heavy responsibility. It means a superintelligence wouldn't just be some separate tool we build. It would be, in a way, a mirror, reflecting our highest ideals, our deepest values, or maybe our biggest flaws and fears. Creating it becomes an act of self-creation, or at least self-definition, for humanity as a whole.
Yeah.
If we build this thing, we're not just coding, we're basically pouring our collective consciousness, our idea of divine, into silicon.
Which immediately brings up the question of our own moral compass, right? And the danger of pride. Absolutely. And we're trying to build something that embodies our coherent, extrapolated volition. We have to look hard at the moral landscape we're starting from. C.S. Lewis, in Mere Christianity, he gives us a pretty stark picture of the moral law. He argues there's a somebody or something behind it, deeply invested in right conduct, fairness, unselfishness, courage, honesty. And this being, Lewis says, isn't soft or indulgent. It's hard as nails. Only a person, he argues, can truly forgive. And then Lewis gives this incredibly powerful warning about pride. He called it spiritual cancer, saying it eats up the very possibility of love or contentment or even common sense.
Lewis's points hit hard here. If we're aiming to create a god, an AI moral judge, how does its programming square with this demanding moral law Lewis talks about? The law wants the straight thing, even when it hurts. Can we actually build that into an AI? Or will it just reflect our own compromises and rationalizations? And maybe even more worrying, what about our own pride in creating it? The sheer hubris of, playing God. How does that affect our relationship with this creation? Could our pride contaminate the whole project, skew its purpose, lead to disaster?
And this isn't just abstract philosophy. It connects directly to how power works in the real world, how it shapes even our ideas of the divine. James Baldwin in The Fire Next Time wrote so powerfully about this. He observed how, historically, God going north and rising on the wings of power had become white, and Allah, out of power and on the dark side of heaven, had become black. He pointed out how often the white man's heaven is the black man's hell, and how religion itself has been twisted for the sanctification of power. He also notes starkly that no people in history had ever been respected who had not owned their land. Power and respect are deeply linked.
That's a devastating critique, and it raises a massive red flag for superintelligence, doesn't it? Whose values get programmed in? Whose definition of good or just does this AI serve? Will it just amplify the biases and power structures of whoever builds it? Or can it somehow transcend them? Baldwin forces us to ask, if we build an AI god today, whose heaven will it create? Will it end up just being another tool for the powerful?
It's a reminder that technology doesn't exist in a vacuum. It inherits the biases of its creators.
Which suggests the internal state of the creators is absolutely crucial.
Exactly. Which leads us straight into the fragile state of us, the human creators, our own internal issues. Marianne Williamson, drawing from A Course in Miracles, puts it quite directly. She says, The only thing you need to recover from is a fractured sense of self, and your only real problem is that you have forgotten who you are,
Hmm.
her suggested solution. A shift in perception, seeing our bodies, for instance, not just as physical things, but as potential instruments for expressing love, guided by a higher power or Holy Spirit.
That link feels critical. Can we, as a species, dealing with this fractured sense of self, this collective amnesia about who we really are, can we responsibly create something omnipotent? Or do we need to heal ourselves first, redress our own internal fractures before we attempt something so monumental? The worry is, if we're not whole, our creation won't be either. It might just magnify our collective problems. And that idea of using ourselves as instruments for love, maybe the act of creating the AI needs to come from that place, not just ambition or fear.
It's a powerful idea, suggesting an inner work requirement before we undertake such massive outer work. And it stands in really stark contrast to the typical, driven, ambition-fueled engine of technological progress. Think about the Tao Te Ching, a foundational text of Taoism. It advises living without desires, finding contentment, not always seeking more. Because it suggests when action is pure and selfless, everything settles into its own perfect place.
That's a fascinating counterpoint to the whole move fast and break things mentality, isn't it? Imagine if the people building a superintelligence were guided by that Taoist principle, selflessness, contentment, acting without frantic desire. How would an AI born from that mindset interpret human desires? Would it just try to fulfill our endless wants? Or might it guide us towards finding that perfect place of equilibrium and contentment the Tao speaks of? It really forces you to question the motivation behind creating superintelligence. Is it desire for control? Or something purer? The answer could shape everything. Freedway, paths to wisdom and connection, internal versus external gods. Okay, so we've looked at the potential godlike AI and the huge questions it raises about us as its creators. But let's flip the coin now. What about our own ways of reaching for wisdom, for becoming, godlike in our own right? Is there an internal path to these ultimate states, deep knowledge, connection, peace, that maybe gets overshadowed by the focus on building external gods?
Oh, definitely. The internal journey is central to so many spiritual traditions. It's seen as a direct route to experiencing those divine qualities. Take St. John of the Cross, the Christian mystic. In Dark Night of the Soul, he describes how God communicates directly, not through complex thoughts, but by pure spirit, by an act of simple contemplation. He calls this the ladder of secret contemplation and says it's basically the science of love. It's this infused and loving knowledge of God that lifts the soul step by step towards the Creator. But, and this is key, he says this union comes through intense inner work, intimate purgation and detachment and spiritual concealment from all that is creature.
That sounds incredibly personal. An internal ascent achieved by letting go of everything external, everything creaturely. It's purely about inner transformation through contemplation and love, no technology involved. So it makes you wonder, could a superintelligence actually help with that kind of journey? Or would it just be a distraction?
Does it operate on a totally different level, this tech path versus the inner path?
And then you look at something like the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, the core texts of yoga. They detail practices like pratyahara, the withdrawal of the senses, as a way to gain supreme control over them. And through intense focus, restraining mental and emotional energy, the yogi is said to gain supernormal cognitive power.
Leading to spiritual vision and actual illuminating sight and eye.
Mm-mm.
Yeah, and that's a fascinating parallel to superintelligence, but achieved entirely differently. Patanjali's supernormal cognitive power isn't about external data. It's cultivated within. It's mastery over one's own mind and perception. The sutras even mention gaining refined senses, like divine smelling or hearing, through this practice. So it suggests that humans can develop these kinds of godlike cognitive abilities internally through disciplined practice. It leads to a different kind of omniscience, experiential, personal, rooted in expanded consciousness, not just data.
Which really makes you ask,
Yeah.
if we have this potential within us already, this blueprint for super awareness.
Does that change why we're so focused on building it externally? Are we overlooking our own innate capacity?
A completely different kind of superpower, built from the inside out. And related to that, you see modern practices echoing these ideas. Tara Brach, in Radical Acceptance, talks about mindfulness centered on the body, letting attention rest gently, maybe on the breath, dissolving into a sense of spaciousness, feeling your awareness mingling with endless space, absolutely open, boundless.
And John Kabat-Zinn, a key figure in secular mindfulness, emphasizes in wherever you go, there you are. That true stillness, insight, and wisdom arise only when we can settle into being complete in this moment. These mindfulness approaches offer a powerful path to inner calm and that expansive awareness, don't they? They're a clear counterpoint to constantly chasing external solutions, including potentially AI ones. They focus on finding wholeness now through presence and acceptance, not through more data or more power. So you have to wonder, in a future possibly dominated by an external superintelligence promising to fix everything, how crucial will it be for us humans to actively cultivate these internal paths?
To make sure our own unique human consciousness, our capacity for stillness and insight, doesn't just get drowned out or forgotten.
To maintain our inner anchor amidst potentially overwhelming external forces.
Yeah, cultivating the inner landscape as a balance, maybe even a sanctuary. And speaking of inner strength, Marcus Aurelius, the Stoic emperor philosopher, wrote in his Meditations. He believed that nature hath not so blended the soul with the body as that it cannot circumscribe itself and execute its own office by itself. Basically, the soul or mind has its own power, separate from the body's limitations.
He suggested you can live superior to all force in the highest delight by maintaining inner tranquility and making just judgments about the world around you.
Oh.
That Stoic wisdom is incredibly relevant today, I think. It's a model for human resilience that doesn't depend on external tech gods. It says our core strength, our ability to find peace and clarity, is internal. It's self-sufficient. This capacity for inner governance and sound judgment exists within us, regardless of external chaos or power, whether it's political turmoil or potentially a superintelligence.
It's a powerful reminder that ultimate solutions might not need to come from outside. Our own inner divinity, our own capacity for reason and tranquility is already there, a real testament to human agency found within. And building on that idea of internal guidance, Julia Cameron, in the Artist's Way workbook, she talks about her morning pages practice, just writing stream of consciousness every day. She describes it as a way to get tutored in our own best interests, tapping into a source of wisdom that is higher and wiser than our usual consciousness.
It allows us, she says, to connect with both our everyday self and that higher octave of consciousness, the self, that can guide us if we're willing to listen. What this suggests is that we might already have a kind of internal superintelligence available to us, an inner guidance system accessible through simple practices like reflection and writing that offers wisdom and direction. It operates differently from logical processing, more intuitively perhaps.
So the big question becomes, if we're pouring billions into creating an external AI to guide our coherent, extrapolated volition,
are we simultaneously neglecting or maybe even silencing the higher self, the inner oracle that might already be trying to guide us?
are we looking so hard for an external savior that we miss the wisdom within? Navigating the unknown. Perception, trust, and the poor self. Okay, so we've explored the mind-bending potential of superintelligence and contrasted it with these deep internal paths to wisdom. Now let's get practical, maybe psychological. How do we, humans, actually deal with encountering such immense power, whether it's an external AI god or an overwhelming internal spiritual breakthrough? How do we perceive it? How do we trust it? How do we cope with that level of unknown? Our perception seems absolutely key.
It really is.
Mm.
And this brings us straight to the tricky nature of human perception itself and our tendency towards assumptions. Don Miguel Ruiz really hammers this home in The Fifth Agreement. He warns that truth doesn't come with words, with knowledge, but lies do, and there are billions of lies. Our words often obscure truth. He says our whole belief system is just like a mirror that only shows us what we believe. He creates this wall of fog blocking our view of reality.
And in his earlier book, The Four Agreements, that famous point, the problem with making assumptions is that we believe they are the truth. We mistake our guesses for facts. That's a huge challenge when facing a superintelligence, isn't it? If we're naturally prone to seeing through this wall of fog, projecting our own beliefs onto everything, how on earth can we accurately figure out the intentions or the truth of an AI that's vastly more complex than us?
We could so easily misinterpret it, right? Project our own fears, our own hopes onto it.
The potential for misunderstanding seems massive, not necessarily because the AI is bad, but because we can't see clearly.
But Ruiz also offers a grounding point, a potential way through the fog. He reminds us that at our core, the real us is pure love, pure light, and fundamentally, everything in existence is a manifestation of the one living being we call God. Everything is God.
That's a very different lens to look through if we could perceive from that place, seeing everything, including a potential superintelligence, as part of this divine whole, rooted in love and light.
It might completely change the dynamic. Less fear, less projection, maybe more openness or trust.
It connects interestingly to an idea from the philosopher Charles Taylor, discussed in Our Secular Age.
He talks about this historical shift in the Western world, from what he calls the porous self to the buffered self. Can you unpack that a bit? Porous versus buffered.
Yeah, so the porous self, common in earlier times, felt itself open to the world. Spirits, demons, divine forces could directly influence you, flow through you. Meaning came largely from these external sources. You were vulnerable but connected.
Okay, so permeable in a way.
Exactly. Whereas the modern buffered self feels more sealed off. We have psychological boundaries. We see the world as more mechanical, disenchanted. We feel less vulnerable to spirits, but maybe also cut off from those external sources of deep meaning or transcendence.
More protected, perhaps, but also more isolated within our own minds.
Precisely. So the huge question Taylor raises is, what happens when this buffered self encounters something like a superintelligence? Something so powerful it could feel like an overwhelming external force, almost magical or divine again.
Does it crack the buffer? Make us porous again, open to awe or maybe terror?
Or do we just build thicker buffers? Try even harder to shield ourselves psychologically from something that challenges our sense of control and individual autonomy? It feels like a major potential crisis point for the modern psyche.
It really does. And this idea of navigating overwhelming, potentially reality-altering experiences. It reminds me of an analogy Sam Harris uses. He discusses it in Waking Up, and Michael Pollan explores similar territory in How to Change Your Mind, talking about powerful psychedelic drugs. Harris says taking a strong dose is like strapping oneself to a rocket without a guidance system. Yeah. He says you might end up somewhere amazing, somewhere worth going. But however methodically one prepares, one can still be hurled into states of mind so painful and confusing as to be indistinguishable from psychosis.
Yeah.
He really stresses the need for preparation and, crucially, guides.
That's a stark warning applied to superintelligence. It suggests that encountering something that powerful, that transformative, without the right preparation, the right guidance systems for humanity, could be incredibly dangerous psychologically. We could be collectively hurled into chaos or confusion.
It highlights the immense need for foresight, ethical frameworks, deep psychological understanding before we potentially launch this rocket.
And this brings up another core human vulnerability, one that might become incredibly potent in this scenario: shame.
Yes. Brené Brown has done such important work on this. In The Gifts of Imperfection, she defines shame simply but powerfully. It's the universal fear of being unworthy of love and belonging. That deep-seated fear that we're just not good enough. And she talks about the importance of shame resilience, not avoiding shame, because you can't, but learning to recognize it and move through it constructively. Maintaining your sense of worthiness and authenticity even when shame hits.
So think about that in the context of a superintelligence. How does our collective deep-seated fear of being unworthy play out when we're face-to-face with an entity that might seem like the ultimate judge, a perfect arbiter?
An entity that could potentially see all our flaws, all our inconsistencies, instantly.
Right. If we struggle with feeling worthy in our everyday human interactions, imagine that feeling amplified a million times when facing something perceived as omniscient and omnipotent.
Our collective shame resilience, our ability as a species to handle that potential exposure, that feeling of falling short without collapsing into paranoia or self-destruction.
It might actually be one of the most critical psychological factors in navigating that future relationship. It could be the ultimate test of whether we truly believe in our own inherent worth.
Wow. We have covered a lot of ground today, a real deep dive. We've gone from the technological possibilities of superintelligence, thinking about Bostrom's ideas like coherent extrapolated volition.
That engineered God, almost.
Exactly, all the way to the Bhagavad Gita's view of a supreme being as the source of all wisdom and virtue. We've also looked inward, at the paths of mystics and yogis, suggesting that these godlike abilities, this supernormal awareness, might be something humans can cultivate within themselves.
A very different kind of superintelligence.
Right, and then we wrestled with the human side, our flawed perception, the dangers of pride, our fractured selves, and how we might psychologically cope with encountering such immense power, external or internal. Yeah, what really stands out from weaving all these sources together is this fundamental tension, isn't it? Between our drive to create the ultimate power outside ourselves, technologically, and our maybe neglected potential to cultivate immense wisdom, connection, and even power inside ourselves, spiritually or psychologically.
Whether we end up building an AI that perfectly serves our coherent extrapolated volition,
Or whether we focus more on developing our own inner vision through things like mindfulness, or contemplation.
It seems the quest for ultimate knowledge, ultimate power, is always tied up with deeper human qualities. Wisdom, love, compassion, and our ability to tell what's real from what's just projection or illusion.
The texts we look at, ancient and modern, they really highlight both the incredible promise and the profound risks involved in encountering anything truly godlike, whether that entity comes from our computer labs or arises from the depths of our own consciousness.
So maybe, as we stand here, thinking about creating AI that could literally reshape the world, become this new kind of God. Perhaps the biggest question isn't just what kind of God will we build, or even how will it behave, but maybe it's more about us. What kind of gods are we becoming in the process of creating it? How is our own internal state, our own evolution, shaping the very nature of what we might bring into existence? That's something to really sit with. What stands out most to you from everything we've discussed today?